Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. If you're just joining us, my name is Johan, and we are going to be talking about K2 systems, mounting solutions, and a little bit of history on our mounting solutions, and just kind of the background of how mounting systems have changed over the years. I'm here working out of my home office in Berkeley, California. We're located in Oceanside, California, our main office. Looks like Nick Pack has joined us. Nick, you're not muted, just so you know. So Nick's on our sales side. He's joining us as well. And we will be going over all kinds of things. So if you're new to the webinar series, you're probably not new to this, but everybody's muted. So if you do have questions, please type them in. I'm going to go over a lot of stuff. We did extend this to an hour and a half, but if you have to jump off at the end of the hour, I understand. But to get I guess we can give an hour credit for 1 hour. So that's fine, but we extended this to an hour and a half because we tend to go over. There's a lot to talk about here. We like to do a little bit of Q&A, but if you do have questions, you can type them in, and we'll talk more about some of these topics as we get to the end. So without further ado, I will just hop right into it. So again, my name is Johan Alfson. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing, but my background is in installation and technical training. So I manage I manage the marketing department along with Dakota. And she's on here in the background, making sure everything's running smoothly. And she manages our marketing department. I come more from the technical side, managing some of the more product marketing as well as product technical training. And we're developing a whole new training program and adding all kinds of videos and technical tips and tricks and things like that. So again, my background was as an installer when I entered the market. I entered the industry in 2004. And then from 07, probably actually 06 to about end of 2018, I helped launch Quick Mount PV, which was a company. It's not necessarily a company anymore. It's more of a product now, but I left them in 2018 and joined K2, which was then called Everest, and now we are K2, and I'll explain that in a minute. So I've been with K2 for about 3 years now, and my history has been working on product development, technical training, and obviously a little bit of sales as we got growing. And Nick actually worked with me at Quick Mount for many years, so we've been on this journey together about almost 15 years now. So we've seen a lot of changes, and I'm going to get into that as we get into this, what I call the kind of evolution of mounting systems. So the agenda, oops, let me move this forward, sorry. So the agenda, obviously we'll do some introductions and about the K2 Everest name change. I'll clear that up real quick. We'll go over the CrossRail system, which is our standard racking system that has many different platforms, and it gets into our mounting systems as a whole. And with that, we'll get into the history and evolution of mounting systems as I talked about, and we will talk about what's kind of new in this, metal flashings versus non-metal flashings, get into some of our tile products and what's available now and what's coming in the future as we develop new products. And then of course, a Q&A session at the end. So as I mentioned, you're probably familiar with the Everest name. Maybe you understand and know why we changed to K2, but just to give you a little quick history and background, K2, we've always been K2. It's been our parent company that started in Germany in 2004, and then it quickly grew in Europe and opened up many different offices in Italy, France, the UK, and then eventually the US and Mexico in 2012 and 15. And the name wasn't readily available for K2 in the solar industry. So we just chose the next biggest mountain, or I guess the biggest mountain. And we went with Everest for many years, and we were known under that name. But just last year and starting the beginning of this year, we fully changed names, and we did get the rights to the K2 Systems name in the solar industry. And so now it's much less confusing, actually, because we're all one company. So, which is great, because we do have meetings with all the different offices all over the world and get to compare engineering and product development, which is very exciting, and seeing the different roof types and the different approaches. And it gives us a much wider scope of solutions and to make solar installations easier, faster, better. So that worldwide international knowledge is really, really nice to have. And so we have 10 locations. Actually, I should change this to say, it says Vista USA in California, but we just moved back to Oceanside in the San Diego area. That's where our US office is. And I'm down there very often. We just moved into a big old new facility, and it's very exciting. We built some roofs so we could do training. And the next one of these that I do, instead of having my home version table here with parts and samples, I will have the roof set up, and we'll do more kind of live, maybe move the camera and get a little closer into the roofing and products and how it installs. So we're hoping to do that soon. So you'll see that coming in the next one. And if you're not on our newsletter, please do sign up, and you'll get all the updates. And we're doing a lot more videos too. So the newsletter will give you all the updates on new hires and new product information, new videos, and things like that. So just a quick intro to our team. Our US sales team is managed by Ross Gerard and Brett Nielsen, who works on business development, but we all have a hand in product development. Obviously, the needs of the customers are driven by the sales team. Our outside sales team, I mentioned Nick Pack. He's on this webinar to help out, and he has a good knowledge of mounting systems, as we've been working in the industry for 10 plus years together, actually. And he manages the sales out in the Northwest. So we're out in the Northern California in the San Francisco Bay Area, but he covers a wide range all over the West. And we've also got on the East side, we've got Al, who's probably the longest standing outside sales rep, I believe. And he manages the East Coast. We did just bring on somebody in Florida to help out down there. I don't have his info in here. I apologize for that. I need to update that, but it is all on our website. We just hired Javier. He is an addition to the team that we're very excited about out in Florida. He's actually, I believe, in Tampa, I think. So he's down in Florida, and on our website, you can click on find a sales rep, and it shows you a whole map of where everybody is. So you can find everybody in your region to talk about, how do I get samples, products, who's stocking, things like that. So we've got Brad in the Midwest, and his territory is quickly growing. He's done a phenomenal job in the Midwest and helping out down in the South as well with Mark. Mark's in the South, based out of Texas. And John is in Southern California, which looks small there, but that market is huge, probably the number one market in the US. So it's very saturated in that Southern California area where we are based. Our inside sales team, we have client services as well as technical sales, which is led by Alejandra. She's been with the company for, I want to say, 5 years or so. She's been there for a while, maybe longer. But they've done a great job of taking care of customers and linking our distributors and who's stocking what, and helping our distributors get stocked, and supporting our outside sales team. So getting into the CrossRail system, I want to make sure you guys understand all this so that when I get into the roof attachments, then you could see how this is applicable to all these systems. So again, if you have questions, feel free to type them in. We will do a Q&A at the end. We've got plenty of time. I think, I'm going pretty fast here, so I'll try to make sure I keep an eye on the clock and keep a good chunk of time for questions at the end. And don't be shy, definitely enter in your questions. So if you've never used this system before, 44X is probably our most popular now. We released that about 2 years ago, and it's kind of I would say, lighter version of the 48X. And when I say lighter, I mean actually lighter in weight, but it's not a light rail in the sense that it's limited to, very low snow loads or no snow loads. I know some manufacturers have a light rail that's specifically for like the California market, Southern California, where there's a lot of solar happening. But this product actually is lighter weight, but the engineering is really, really good on this. And we have these 44X rails being installed in the Northeast as well. So it can take snow loads, and it depends on the design and the layout. And that's where our base tool comes in handy. So Nick's been really good about demoing, and I think he's done some presentations. I think he did a webinar just recently or has one coming up on the base tool. And the base tool allows you to design with our roof attachments, with all of our rail series that you have here, and see what engineering and layout works best for your region. So you put in the zip code, it allows you to build a system, and you can change the rails and the roof attachments and figure out what is going to be the best bang for your buck. Because sometimes the cheapest system is not going to be the strongest for your area and not going to make sense in dollars. Or maybe you're spending too much money and you're beefing it up too much, and you think that light rail is not designed for your area, but give it a shot. So, and then you get a BOM at the end, a design system, it's engineered, and our inside sales team, our tech sales team is using that every day, as well as our outside sales team. So if you're not familiar with the Base online tool, it's called Base. Sign up, it's free, and then take a little webinar or a training with one of our reps and go through it and understand. That will help you pick these rails. So we have 44X, our 48X, our 48XL is just a beefier, thicker aluminum version of the 48X. And then the 80. The 80 is more ground mount oriented. It's taller. And so the number pertains to how tall the actual rail is. So if you're wondering where that number comes from, that's actually the size of it in millimeters, how tall it is. So 44X, 48X, and then we have 48XL, as I mentioned, being the thicker version of the 48. And then 80, which is more focused on ground mount. So as I'm mentioning these types of systems, the application for this rail lends to almost all of these, aside from mini rail and D-dome that you see there. But our parts and our accessories are all transferable universally across all these platforms. Like our mid clamps and our MLPE mounting accessories, wire management, things like that. So we have all our rails can be applied to many different types of platforms. Like you have the dual rail, which is the most standard. You have 2 rails per rows of modules. The most standard system you're doing out there, most installers are doing 2 rails per rows of modules. Shared rail is kind of a more, I would say, advanced system, where if you're familiar with the system, you can actually take our same rail and split 2 rows and catch 2 rows of modules, and they share a rail, which is really handy if you're trying to, get into tight spaces and you don't want to use so much rail. It works really well on metal roofs and comp shingle roofs. And it uses the same hardware. There's only one little additional part that adds it as a split rail, and it allows you to split the modules evenly and securely so that you get it. It's almost like a little divider on the mid clamp that is adapted to our existing mid clamp. And then you have the tilt-up system, which is using our rail. And the cool thing about the tilt-up system is the back leg and that front leg that acts as kind of a little, your pyramid shape there to get your cross rails, which is where the name of CrossRail actually comes from originally. Is, in the old days, they'd put base rails and then have rails go across. And then there's our little climber set that grabs on there. Since then in the US, we've eliminated the base rail, but on the tilt-up system, it still has that base rail, which is really nice because it's adjustable, and the back leg is actually just a little short piece of rail, and you can get anywhere from 7, 10, and 15 degree tilts based on our engineering, and that's pre-engineered. So the tilt system is actually really cool. It's very adjustable, very forgiving, and it's very robust. So you're starting to see that a lot in the Southwest, and I'll talk about that in a minute as we get into these systems. But I just want to explain that all of our rails can be adapted to the dual rail, shared rail, tilt up, as well as ground mount. The only unique platforms here that are a little different on the rail side is mini rail, which is its own little mini rail system, and then the D-Dome, which is a railless dual tilt self-ballasting system. So, but all the components are actually transferable between all these systems. So our mids, our ends, end caps, for the most part on end caps if you're using rail, and then T-bolts and hardware and ground lugs, things like that. So if you're wondering, if you never used the system before, we do pilots with installers. So if you're interested in trying this, it's in stock with all our major distributors, and our sales reps can help you get introduced to this. And I do more technical in-depth training based on system types with crews alone, either in person, digitally, on site, so we can coordinate that. So again, these parts are universal, and I'll just hop right into these parts real quick. Nick, I didn't want to cut you off. I think you were gonna, I don't know if you're gonna say anything.
No, you're doing great. You were driving over, going over the tilt system. So we'll get into that when you get to that slide. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So just to show an up close version of these clamps, everybody, if you haven't used our system, the first thing you're going to notice that's different, obviously, is the clamps and how they go in the rail. So what's unique about our rail system is that you can use the rail as an actual raceway for your wires, which is really nice. I just did a system where we were using the new trunk cables from Enphase, and I figured out a really nice system where I tucked in all the trunk cable into the rail underneath the mounting hardware for the actual microinverter, and then the whips that connect, just leave them out going under the hardware. I didn't have to use any zip ties at all. And if I was transitioning out of the rail, we have these little clips that clip on the top and keep it inside the rail channel. Some guys like to go outside and do their connectors and put them on the side. We have side little wire clips, and I'll show that here in a minute. But so the rail has a nice deep channel, so you can put your wires in there, but the clamps are really nice as well. So I don't know if you can see my camera, but these are the mid clamps, and I'll show a little image of that as we get into this. But this is just a little sample section. This is our sample kit. We usually include a dark, our rail connector, also known as a splice, and our mill rail here that's standard. So from the side, when you drop in this clamp, so I want to make sure I'm very clear. So if you can see my camera here, I'm just putting this up close. This is the clamp. And so a couple of years ago, we changed, this used to be an Allen head. In Europe, everything's metric, and it was an Allen head to begin with. You could see the original clamp there. We didn't change the part number. So if you're from the distribution side, all you see is an H at the end for the hex at the top. I think most of the Allens and the old historical products are probably out now. They're probably flushed through the system of inventory. So we changed the Allen to be, so it's single tool. This is the mid clamp that bonds and separates the module. We added this little tubular feature here so that the bolt now is encapsulated into this flute and doesn't drop down to the bottom of, we call this an MK3. It's a little kind of a strut nut almost. If you ever use strut, you're familiar with those strut nuts that go in there. It works kind of similarly. But it has bonding in there. So if you look real close, you can see in there, let's see how good my camera is, those little circles on there, those are actually little bonding features that go into the rail. So it bonds at the top into the frame of the module, and it also bonds it to the rail so that you have that UL 2703 listing that we've certified it for. And it's all UL listed and everything and tested. So when you install this, what I tell guys to do, if you're new to this, if you're not new to this, this is probably boring, but if you're new to this, what you want to do is I kind of palm it from the top, grab these little plastic clips, which are not structural. It's just an installation aid. And I kind of bend them back, and it allows you to kind of grab it there. And then you drop it into the rail just below those little ribs there, and then turn. And as you turn, it's biting into the anodization or into the aluminum, and it creates a bond between the frame and the rail. So that's why it gives you a little bit of friction. But once you have it in, the plastic seats in there nicely, and you can move it around and slide it. It's spring loaded so that when you bring in the module, it's already up and you just push this down and drive it in. And so I could show an animation of that. It's a little bit easier to see than my,
Johan,
yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I have the same thing. I have a setup here on camera for everybody too, especially all of you Enphase users out there, or anybody who's doing wire management. I've got some module frame sections cut on our mid clamp right here for you guys. So you can see the engagement on the frame and literally how much surface area the rail has on that module frame, and how a lot of people have told us, there's a lot of positive engagement with the rail and the actual clamp itself with our system. And that's what we really try to drive for you. But as far as what Johan was saying with wire management, I've got some Q cable in the rail for you. And you guys can see all of the real estate you have there to move that cable throughout the system. This is like Johan said, this is a big deal in our industry. The only people who are making wire management accessories are the racking manufacturers. So it all does kind of land on us where to get all this cable managed. So you can see here throughout the rail, there is a lot of options for you guys if you choose to jump onto our equipment. You can really manage the cable, loom it around, and get your system nice and organized up on the roof. Go ahead, Johan.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And the rail engagement is a really, really good point. And a lot of our sales guys will actually, when I say sales guys, I actually mean sales reps from our customers. So installation sales reps always get asked about, why is this different? Or what's different about your installation than the competition? Because you're always going to have to compete against guys who are selling maybe cheaper stuff. And not that ours is the most expensive, but we do have that German engineering that's pretty robust and, sometimes more material. We're working really hard at designing products to not be too much material, have a good price point, but also be strong and maintain that German engineering that we're proud of. So what he's talking about with that rail engagement, what I was mentioning is, what we're both mentioning here is that a lot of sales reps for solar installers will actually take a competitor's clamp and our clamp and show how the rail engages. And it's just a little tiny T-bolt on most of them. And ours has this bigger MK3. If you look at the screen there, that bottom right corner picture, you can see the rail engagement is so much bigger than a little small T-bolt, So it's this big strut nut. We call it an MK3. So if you want to use that technology or that terminology with your customers as you're selling this, you're more than welcome to use any of our marketing materials. In fact, we started working with some of our close partners that are K2 certified, K2 Pro certified. It's a new certification we're working on, and we do provide much more, not just install training and best practices, but sales training and marketing training for your whole team. So we provide these tools for you guys if that's something you're interested in. So when I talk about this rail engagement, this gives you a little bit better view inside of this digital animation. So it's all pre-assembled. There the clamp is going in, and then you'll see the modules go in. So it's pretty simple. If you haven't seen this before, you can get a sample kit, and that really helps. If you're going to be transitioning to the system, just get a sample kit and play with it and see how it goes in, rather than being on the roof and trying to figure it out. So, but yeah, so the robustness of those MK3s have been a big selling point for our customers, and it's just easier to install once you get the hang of it. And that MK3 is also used for our MLPEs. If you're putting an optimizer in or a micro inverter or anything on the rail, it does allow you to use that as well. So it has the same MK3 and just a little bolt there that allows you to secure the MLPE to the rail. So we've been working on some more wire management. You could see there, you've got solar edge in, and the wires are transitioning into the rail channel, and then coming out and using our clips to secure it. So If you're wanting to get any of these products, the part numbers, I try to include all the part numbers in there. This is our ground lug. I do have a wire management slide. I'll show you that here in a minute. The ground lug uses the MK3. This is our Everest ground lug. And that goes into the top channel of the rail, which is really common for dual rail. And you can just put it into the top channel anywhere you want. Very simple, easy. Bonds the copper wire into the rail channel. Our Yeti clamp is our hidden end clamp, and that grabs the inside flange of the module. That's a beneficial system. I mean, product if the system is on the edge of the roof or on the front side of the system of the house, and the homeowner is going to be looking at it every day. You want to sell that quality and the clean look of it. A lot of people are installing skirts, but if you install a system well enough, you can actually make it look real clean, tight, and tuck the rails in with this Yeti clamp. So you can chop the side of the rail off flush with the module, and then you can use this Yeti clamp that grabs the inside flange of it and secures it, but hides the hardware, and you can end cap it. So, and that looks really good. If you are at the edge of the module, what I will say is, being an installer myself, getting under there on any hidden end clamp, you usually have to get underneath the system and reach under there and try to tighten it down or pull it in or however you need to install it. But it usually involves you getting your hands somewhat underneath the module. So if you're using this and it's at the edge of the roof, it can be a little hard to do. So from installer perspective, if you're the boss of the crew and you're not necessarily doing the installs, but you're leading them, just know that if it's on the edge of the roof, it might be a little hard for them to get in there and do that from the edge of the roof. So that's where the standard end clamps that are top down mounted come into play. And so if you're using the Yeti end clamps, hidden end clamps, I would still order the standard end clamps just to have them on the truck and in the warehouse as a backup, just to keep it safe for your guys that are on the edge of the roof there. And you want to make sure they're not, putting themselves in any kind of sticky situation, because it can be a little hard to work on the edge of the roof like that. So here's a little animation again. These are all from our product videos. Everything's pre-assembled when it comes together there. And then it shows you how the Yeti clamp goes under the module. And then you could see right through the module in this case, and it slides forward and then tightens down. And when you tighten that down, it actuates that kind of hammer, and then it tightens the Yeti clamp onto the frame of the module. And then you can put your end cap and make it all nice and clean and tight. So there, Nick's showing on his camera the Yeti clamp and a little cut section of module frame. And she's physically showing you how it hammers down on there. And then the hex is inside the rail, and then you can cap it off. Perfect. So our rail connectors, this is actually a really nice product. If you're using other racking systems, a lot of them use self-tapping screws, and they tend to shear off the head pretty easily because you're probably using an impact. And when you're using an impact, at some point, the screw is going to stop and it can't go any further, but the impact's going to keep going. So it shears the head of the screw. In our case, we're using T-bolts. So it's the same T-bolts that connects the rail to your roof attachment. So you don't have to get any special parts. It's all the same. So this makes it a mechanically fastened rail connector. We call it a rail connector because that's what it does. It extends the rail and it connects the rails. So generically they call them splices. We call it a rail connector because this is not limited to any position on the roof. So some competitors out there actually have limitations. If you read the fine print and you look at what their limitation is, sometimes you cannot install beyond that second to last mount. You have to be back sometimes 2 mounts, but our rail connector can actually be installed anywhere. So it's that strong. It basically extends the rail as if it was one continuous rail. So that is a huge benefit if you're installing these systems. There's no special hardware. It's not limited. So there's no room for error. So just keep that in mind. Wire management solutions. I mentioned this earlier. We do have a top clip that's called the TC wire management clip. There's the part number there. And then we have two different clips that clip to the side of the rail. So where you have that T-bolt channel, you could put the Omega clip, which is a plastic clip, just goes in there and retains. And then there's one that slips over the top and then gives you kind of a little strat on the side of the rail, which is our hay clip. That one's a metal one. So this is a really good example of where you can do your connectors on the side of the rail if you don't want them in the rail channel, which some guys don't want to do. You can put it on the outside, clip it, and then you could still transition any excess rail or home runs in the rail channel and clip it down with the TC wire clip. This avoids using zip ties that might, degrade, crack, and break in the end. You got to think 25 years. So Nick's showing some of those clips on his rail sample kit there. There's the Omega going to the side. And then you have the TC wire clip as well. So
thank you, Johan. A lot of people do ask us about these clips, and they do slide on the channel. So if you need to move them across the roof, you can. It is a malleable ABS, but it's very friendly to use. You can engage it, disengage it when you need it, put them where you want. So I have people in Northern California who use both. They'll use the top channel clamp and they'll use the side attach Omega as well. And they'll mix match just for flexibility on the project.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, having the side channel and top channel is just ideal, having both options. So wire management, as Nick said, is somehow been placed on racking manufacturers. And it, even though we're working with microinverters, optimizers, and modules, and it's their wires, but we tend to end up having to be the guys that have to figure out wire management for you. So the rail does provide a nice solution for that. So getting into roof attachments, we have really expanded our roof attachment offering. So we have comp roof mounts, which we have metal flashing versions that are standard, as well as non-metal flashing that use a butyl. And that's a new product with our splice foot X and XL. And I'll get into that in a minute as we get into kind of the evolution of mounts. The tile mounting solutions that we've just introduced. We've always had tile hooks in Europe, as some of you might know. In Europe, there's a lot of hooks out in the market, and there's different tile styles and roofing. And, it's usually underneath the tiles that are a little different. And so in Germany, they're using tile hooks almost across the board, on all the different tile roofs is mostly hooks. So we've brought over some of those hooks and developed our own as well. And we just released a whole new steel hook series. And you can see that on our website now. And we also introduced our EverFlash TRFs, which are replacement style flashings for tile roofs. And then we have metal mounts as well, standing seam, as well as trapezoidal. A lot of people don't know we've always had our own standing seam clamp. It's called the power clamp. And then we also have the mini rail, which is for trapezoidal. And it's kind of a shared rail system, actually. It's literally a mini rail section, and it attaches to the top of a trapezoidal when it has that flat surface. And I'll get into these one by one here in each roof type. We also introduced, I think it's almost 2 years now, we introduced the T-Foot X. It's not so new anymore, but some folks don't know we have this. It's basically a big T-foot. So if you flip it around, it looks like a T, and it comes with the T-bolt set, but not the lags. So the lags, obviously we don't know what kind of roof type you're going into, but this is optimized to be installed on a flat roof surface. A lot of guys are using this for like cap sheet, like rolled comp cap sheet roofs, putting that down and then going over it with a kind of a chem link, or you can use the I think it's a 6-inch chem link, or maybe the 4-inch, I'm sorry, E-curb. So that allows you to use that standard product. You could see the bottom The bottom right picture has a full racking our tilt system installed with our T-foot X and the ChemLink 4-inch E-curb. So we're working all kinds of new products like that. So getting into these different roof types and these different systems, the dual rail works on all roof types. So tile, comp, metal, you name it. It's pretty versatile. You guys are more familiar with that. Shared rail is specifically for comp shingle and metal roofs because you have to be able to have that adjustability to where to put that rail that's sharing two module rows. So just to put that in perspective, here's the standard dual rail system. Here's a little 4x2 system, just a little small example of what you might see out there in a bigger scale where there's 4 rails for 2 rows of modules, pretty standard. You know, you guys are used to this, but on a shared rail system, like on a standing seam or comp shingle, you would eliminate that one of those middle rails, and you'd share 1 rail for 2 rows of modules. So I know this might be somewhat attractive to you guys, thinking less parts, less, labor, reducing cost. But I would say if you're not familiar with the CrossRail system to begin with, I would start with dual rail and then, graduate to this. And we have a training program for that. And you're, just get in touch with us and we can help you understand how this works, and we can do a lot of training on it. So here's the up close of what that looks like. And I mentioned earlier, there's only one additional part that changes it from a dual rail to a shared rail. And that's that plastic, we call it an add-on. And what that does is if you have your mid clamp on here, you basically take this add-on, and Nick and I are both showing it on the camera, but you basically slip it and straddle over the mid clamp, and that goes in the rail, and then you turn the mid clamp to the side, and then you allow your modules to fall on each side. So that bottom left picture on the slide is a side profile view of what that looks like. And it gives you a perfect shelf to divide the 2 modules so they're not slipping in one other direction. And it gives you a nice even split. You push them flush, and then you get your mid clamp. The same mid clamp for any system that you're doing on CrossRail will work for this, and it still gets that nice bond for UL 2703 listing. So if you're interested in that, definitely let us know. We can do some training with that. So on a comp shingle roof, to have adjustability on the L foot, so you would we just add this slider to our standard flashing, and we have a kit for this, and it adds an L foot, and that lets you run the L foot up and down and have some sliding capability so that you can get your rail exactly where you need it. So that's the slider kit. So on a standing seam metal roof, nothing changes except for the add-on, which Nick's showing there. Oh, that's great. So Nick's got if you look at Nick's screen, he's showing the add-on it's kind of hard to see, but those are frame cuts. So that's a cut piece of frame of a module being split into 2 with 1 mid clamp and 1 rail. So you can see how that'd be super beneficial. And the cool thing is that the mid clamps and end clamps are all universal between this and dual rail. So if you had a weird, sometimes as-built change, you get your plan sets. It's one guy who designs it and sells it, and it's another crew that's up there and has to actually make it reality. So the installers always have to solve problems on the roof. And if they get a system that's like breaking up and they're frustrated and they have extra parts on the truck, they can actually go and revert back to dual rail right on the fly and just eliminate those add-ons, and they're good to go. They can just do it on the fly. So it's very forgiving in that regard. So again, if you're going to do this system, I highly recommend, this is my suggestion here, is start with dual rail, then design a system that is simple for shared rail, and try it out. And we can come out to the job site in most cases and help the crew, but some digital training like this would be helpful with the crew to show them how it works. And so they're not going to have headaches on the roof. And then when it's go time and they go to the roof, we can try to be there and help assist with the install. And then once they kind of get their hands on at least 1 or 2 jobs, they can try some bigger systems. That bottom left picture there is a good example where shared rail is actually a nice system. You got that pyramid shape that comes in, and landscape's usually better for getting more modules on the roof. And in landscape, shared rail is really nice. And that was on standing seam. So you can actually design the system to eliminate hardware. And then after that, you try it out, you design a couple systems in base, and then go back and forth and figure out, do the numbers, crunch the numbers. Is it good in my region? Do you have snow loads? Do these designs work out? What kind of roof types do I have? Does my crew like this? And then make a decision from there.
Johan, I'm glad you brought up base in that, because getting a layout for shared rail is definitely crucial to just having a stepping stone on your execution of the install. And with base, it is a simple click to convert the BOM, or the bill of materials, over to shared rail configuration. So we can demo that for you in our webinar that's coming up on base. Or if you already signed up for base and you are using Sherpa to chat with our tech sales team, you can ask them where that feature is if you can't find it on your own. It is one click on the standing seam metal and on comp shingle to convert that bill of materials and that layout over to shared rail.
That's awesome. Yeah, I highly recommend taking that training with Nick. Nick, do you remember when that webinar is? Is that coming up?
That is this Friday.
Oh.
And I believe that is hosted by Brendan and Luz.
Okay. So Brendan and Luz are our tech sale reps, and they deal with the base tool every day. So highly recommend taking that. I'll try to jump onto that too if I'm free. So definitely try that out if you get a chance. Didn't we just add the tilt system, or is that getting added now? You're muted, Nick.
Sorry about that. That's correct. We actually did just add the tilt system, and you are able to design this exact system that is on screen right now in the base tool. It'll provide the correct amount of accessories for you. It is optimized for single row right now, but we are exploring different applications for multi-row in the future. But right now, you can design exactly what you're looking at on screen with Johan, his presentation. You can design this in the base tool on low slope roofs.
Yeah, so the cool part of this system is I mentioned dual and shared rail being interchangeable parts. This is the same deal. The only additional part to this, to the regular CrossRail standard system with mid clamps, end clamps, is what Nick has in his hand there is the tilt up connector set. And what that does is it connects the back leg and the front leg. And it basically gives you, and see how it's slotted on Nick's slide there, or sorry, Nick's camera. You can slide it and adjust it. What that means is if you got a weird wavy roof and you didn't realize it and you already put the modules in, you can actually just loosen that T-bolt and shift it up, even with the modules in place. Those two jobs you see on my slide, those are both in Tucson, Arizona, where they have a lot of flat roof, residential. Those are both residential homes, and they're flat roofs. So they put in standard standoffs, they roofed them in, and then they put in the tilt system there. And the beautiful part is even with the modules in, everything in, you can kind of fine tune it to get it nice and straight and sit clean and flush. So you don't have to put string lines up. You don't have to get all fancy like that and take too much time. You can literally eyeball it, look, and then make some fine tuning adjustments as you go. And it uses basically rail cuts. So every time I go to an installer's yard, there's always a huge dumpster full of rail cuts, anywhere from 3-foot sections to 1-foot sections. And one of our smallest legs, I think, is like 9.5 inches or something for
That's correct.
7 or 10 inch 12 tilt. So if you go in I don't think it's on this slide. No, it's not. But if you go, we did a whole webinar on this. And it's all recorded for the tilt up system. So or you can watch our videos too. But we have pre-engineered sizes based on the module and the degree you want to tilt for 7, 10, and 15. So if you go on our website, go to the product page, there's a chart there that says, what module you're using, if it's 60 cell, 72 cell, and it gives you the spacing for how far the feet need to go, how big the back leg needs to be and how big the front leg needs to be, and then you're set. A lot of guys that do this in the Southwest, a ton of guys in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas in some cases, where you're starting to see a lot more flat roofs, especially in the Southwest. A lot of guys will pre-build that back leg, and they'll take the rail cuts that they get from job sites and start cutting them down to the sizes. Usually guys are just doing like 10-degree tilts, right? They just standardize on 10-degree, and they'll just cut that, whatever it is, 9.5-inch, I believe, just thinking off the top of my head, but it's on the chart depending on what module, but they'll just cut that size they need. And then they'll put the rail connector on there and just prefab it on there and just put them in buckets. So when they got to go to a job site, they'll go there, and the tilt connector set is already on the back leg, and then they go to the job, then they put on the front leg, and then they just tighten it down and they're good to go. So some guys will even build the front and back legs, and they're not that big. They're 3-foot sections maybe. You can throw them in a van and a truck if you really wanted to, but some guys find it easier to have the rails separated, and then when they get there, attach to the back leg that already has the tilt connector set on there. So everybody's trying to be thinking, everyone's thinking about, how can I speed up the job? How can I be more efficient? And how can I save money? So, recycling is a business. So if you're getting rail cut sections and you're cutting off rails, and it fits within the scope of, or the size of your degree tilt, then by all means save it and use it for a tilt connect set.
Johan, can you go right back to that slide real quick? I wanted to hover over something that you actually mentioned, especially with the climate in Arizona and the single floor construction of residential. We've talked to a lot of architects in the industry, and single floor residential is actually going to be becoming more and more of a widespread standard for new construction. It's a lot more efficient. The rafter engineered system and gigantic attic spaces in very large homes is actually starting to take a downturn in the new homes market. A lot of people are starting to optimize construction standards and build single floor homes because they're faster to build. They're easier to build because we don't require the crane nearly as much to hang elaborate rafter systems on the buildings. And they're able to manage the water and any kind of drainage on a flat roof is a lot easier because they just have to pitch it a little bit, 3 degrees, 7 degree. So we're starting to see a very high demand for people asking for a tilt system that is adaptable and is easy to install. Our tilt system is extremely forgiving. The parts are small, and you have the freedom to make it any size that you want in the field, or like Johan was saying, you can get super organized, cut the parts in-house, and deploy them out to the job site. So a lot of return on investment on this system.
Awesome. Thanks, man. So the other system we have that's within the CrossRail family is the ground mount, and that uses the CrossRail 80. Pretty standard if you're building up, piping out of the ground, and there's different ways to attach to the ground. Obviously, you got cast in place or ground screws, helical piles or ballasted, depending on how you're doing it. You're building up piping, and then we have our ground mount system. We are actually fine tuning this and offering more universal parts for this. So if you've never used our ground mount system, definitely pay attention to our website, because we're about to release some new improved parts to the ground mount system that are going to be more universal. So metal roof solutions, as I mentioned, we have a standing seam clamp and we have a trapezoidal and mini rail system. So the power clamp mini is just a single pin, and then the power clamp standard is a dual pin. And I've got both here, examples here. So they look about the same, but you could see that one is 1 pin and the other one is 2 pins, right? So it just depends on where you're at. Most guys are going for the 2 pin if they're in snow country, which is really common for metal roofs. So you can check that out. We do have the power clamp there, the part numbers there listed. The mini rail system is pretty slick. It actually bonds the modules at the intersections, and it allows you to install this smaller mini rail. So it's this guy here, and you can see that it has these EPDM pads on the sides here. or on the underneath here. And what this does is it's got a series of holes here, so you can shift it to the wherever you go. And then you're only doing one screw per corner here. You're not putting all these holes in. This just allows you to shift this little piece, this mini rail. This is the rail. So it comes in boxes of, I want to say 30. That's the box right there. And they're just stacked in there. So less parts, no big rails. You just put this down on top and it attaches to the metal actually. So as long as it's 26 gauge or thicker, then you can attach it to the metal and not have to look for the structure. So you're at the high point, but it has to be that trapezoidal, has to be a certain thickness and width. It's all in our little calculator. So if you're wondering about that, you can always get in touch with us and we can show you if it's the right system for your application. Moving on to D-Dome. So we do have a whole training on D-Dome itself, but if you are interested in this, you can sign up for the webinar or look at our product. We have some new videos coming out here soon. This is a dual tilt system. So a lot of times some people call it an east-west system, but that's the most applicable application for this. So what I mean by dual tilt is basically instead of having that inner row shading, you have these components. It's railless. So you have a peak and then you have a base and the modules meet there. So you could see here's a system I was on in Arizona, and you see that he's building the system there. And some of them have these corner struts and some of them don't need it. And our base tool does lay this out and gives you a blueprint of where everything goes. And this, since you have a tilt on both sides and you're not just doing inner row shading, this allows you to maximize in tight spaces. You can see on this roof, there's a lot of AC units. There's a very specific space and it's very small and narrow to put in, 2 rows of modules. And here it allows you, instead of having inner row shading and eliminating that space for shade, then you can do dual tilt and maximize the output of this small area. So it also reduces the ballast. So you have less ballast block in there. So it's a pretty attractive system when you get in these tight spaces. So this is an apartment complex and they did this whole complex with solar and they had some tight spaces to work within. So this dual tilt system worked out really well. So I'm going to get into, this is a presentation I did at NABCEP. We just did the NABCEP conference a couple months back. And I did a presentation called The Evolution of Solar Mounting Systems, and a lot of people liked it. And I wanted to just show some of the fun slides in here to show you how and why we're getting into these kind of self-sealing butyl non-metal flashings for comp shingle roofs. So I mentioned I was in the industry. I've been in the industry for almost 15 years now, and I've seen a lot go down. So when I first got in the industry, a lot of people were doing this, just lagging an L-foot straight to the roof, putting sealant on it and praying to their gods that it's not going to leak. And that was their waterproof method, and you can't necessarily blame them because there weren't many products out there to choose from. So in the early days of solar, this was a standard. In some cases, they were even doing wood blocks straight to the roof. I actually went on YouTube and just searched solar mounting just for fun. And I did see guys still saying, put in blocks. And it's just like, that is far from code compliant. So I call this era the goop and a prayer era because that's what they were doing. They were just gooping it with whatever sealant was best that they can get their hands on and praying to their gods it wasn't going to leak. And this method was literally shown on a cover of a magazine in the early 2000s. I think this was 2010, maybe. So a lot of guys ridiculed this magazine cover because it just makes us look bad, right? It's not what roofers would do. And it gave solar a little bit of a bad name, and these were not tested seal methods. So one of, this bottom picture here with this angle stock bracket, you could see where it's concerning. Like your seal might be okay because you gooped it up and your prayers are really good, but the depression that it makes into this comp shingle That's where it gets a little concerning. You get a lot of, expansion, contraction, and the roof moves. So with the heat and the cold and the fluctuation in temperature and this depression in there, it cuts a line into the shingle and water can get in there. So that was the big concern. And there was no testing for this. So what some of the more, conscientious installers were doing in the early 2000s, they were starting to try using roofing products, which is smart. They were using like OD flashings. And, I'm in Berkeley, California, where solar was adopted very, very early on. So I still see some of these OD flashings out there, and some of them have survived and lasted. Some of them not so much. You could see the cracking and the degrading of the rubber. As I mentioned, these roofs move and can move this around. And if it's out exposed on the edge, it could, crack that seal and that rubber. And then there's also room for error. That's literally a picture a guy sent me of a conduit going through, and you'd be amazed at the stuff I get sent. But yeah, that was a fun one. So installer error there, it's not a bad product, but that's installed improperly for sure. The one on the top or middle right, the brown comp shingle roof, that's done properly. So that's the way to do it right. But these are time consuming, they're labor intensive, and they can be quite expensive actually. So cutting the shingles, it just takes too long. So in the early 2000s, I worked for another company and we started doing flashings geared more for the solar installer in mind, right? And it just started out as us making flashings for ourselves, actually. And then it just took off and other people wanted to use them. And we started manufacturing, and that's how, that company was built. And since then, it's, gone, and all the manufacturers make their own flashings now. So comp shingle flashings, replacement flashings for tile, you get into rail free systems. So there's been a lot of innovation in the early 2000s to now. There's been so much progress made in the solar mounting, sector of the solar industry. And it's pretty exciting. And now what you're getting is, so we're starting to see some of these metal flashings be installed improperly. And, these aren't necessarily bad products whatsoever. They're made well. It's just that they're installed wrong. So this happens a lot. And obviously training is needed. And the one on the far left, again, not a bad product, but it's installed wrong, flat, straight up. It's installed improperly. It needs to be under the third course. So on top of the first course, under the second course, and just barely underneath that third course, which means sometimes you got to remove a nail. You've all seen the install videos of these products. Sometimes you do have to remove a nail. The one in the middle there, it's just, these other two are kind of more comical. That was a job I was on and we were installing, and I looked behind me and the AC unit just had an OD flashing glued down, and talk about goop and a prayer. I mean, that was a Hail Mary right there. The flashing is installed incorrectly. So not all roofers and HVAC guys are good at roofing either. So that's installed very wrong. And the one on the far right is just, I don't even know what to say. It's installed backwards and through the shingle, it's wrong. Let's just say that. The product, again, is not bad. I'm not knocking the manufacturer of this product. We're knocking the application, and the manufacturer themselves will say that that's totally wrong and that's not right. So there's a lot of room for error. And not only that, when you're, metal flashings are never going away. The installers know how to do it. It is roofing best practices. But sometimes if you're in places in like Nevada, like Las Vegas, big solar market there, really hot too. And the shingles just get baked. And when they get baked, you can't necessarily break that natural seal to get a metal flashing underneath there. So these non-metal flashings are coming into the market now, and I understand why. So a decade of my own career has been talking about flashing and roofing and best practices, but now you're starting to see these non-metal flashings come into the market, and I can understand why. Because when you're trying to pry up the shingles, you can damage the shingle. You can void the warranty of the roof. You can rip the shingle. You can create other problems that are doing more harm than good. And I understand that in places like Arizona, Even where Nick lives in the East Bay, in the valley, it gets really hot, probably like in the hundreds in the summer sometimes, and just bakes those shingles down to where you can't pry them up without damaging the shingle. So, and you could even say that with the cold too, they get brittle and they can crack and corrode and break. So I understand where these are coming from. And some guys will say, well, aren't we going back to the goop and a prayer era? And I will say to that, no, because these manufacturers are hopefully doing the proper testing, using the right materials that are compatible, and providing, engineered systems that are going to be compatible with these roof types. So when we were looking at this and starting to make new roof attachments, we took a hard look at all the products out there, and everybody uses something different, right? There's either sealant-based products, which just use, some might argue they're goop and a prayer, but, hopefully they've done their testing and they show that this works and they're encapsulated. Who knows? Some are using EPDM pads, like a giant sealing washer kind of thing, or silicone, or butyl. So when we researched all of these, the most data we found, honestly, was with, and I'll go back to this slide, but I would say I'm gonna skip real quick to this slide. We found that Roof Tech had the most data, the longest track record of using butyl. They did all kinds of extensive testing, salt spray test, heat tests, obviously the structural testing as well, movement. So they use a specialized butyl, and we were so impressed with it that we end up sourcing the same butyl and putting it on our own product, which is called the splice foot. So we use their butyl and their screws, and we're researching all kinds of different styles like this to see what works in different applications. But right now our splice foot uses this butyl and these screws, and I'll show you the benefit of that here as we get into this. So let me back up again, talk about comp shingle roofs real quick. So the reason why this is important to know is because when you're installing on top of a comp shingle roof, the style of the comp shingle is going to become important because you're going to have uneven surfaces. You're going to have seams and breaks between the shingles, and it's important to know. So the most common is this architectural shingle roof. It's more of a long-lasting product, whereas 3-tab was kind of a more cheap solution. They're still out there, but they're not as long of a lifespan. They're more like a 10, maybe 15-year product. You have seams in between each tab. Whereas on the architectural, which is a longer lifespan, anywhere from, 25 years, maybe. It could be anywhere from 15 to 20 years. It really depends on where they are and the manufacturer. But the way these are built is they have these little high sections and low sections, and the seams are not as often as 3-tab, but you do get the seams, but they're not as frequent. And the seams are important because you want to seal that. And if you're installing on top, or if you have an uneven surface, you want to seal or level it out or shim it out with either a shingle or an extra piece of butyl, in our case. And then the high definition shingles are not as common. They are very high end, so they're more expensive. You see them on high end homes, and they last much longer, probably more like a 50-year life mark. And they have these decorative staggered, teeth to them, and you can actually cut them and make a clean, nice, even surface to attach. But they are thicker, so you want to make sure you're getting your threads down through the comp shingle and installed through the ply and hitting your structure, whatever, if that's deck or rafter. So it's just good to know. And then also with shingles, I do a whole section on roof inspection, looking for, this is my it's almost like you're renting a car, right? You want to walk around the roof and make sure you're not inheriting any pre-existing damage before you install the roof on the roof. So looking at the shingles and making sure they're not blistering, cracking, corroding. You can see when the granules start coming out and it looks a little like you could see when it starts to age and it's starting to go away and the shingles are becoming loose. It's just, you could tell when it's time to go. And that's when you want to re-roof. And looking in the attic, what's the structure? Is it plywood, OSB? Are there the rafters intact? What are you dealing with, basically? So I do that more in our certification program and our training, and we're doing a lot more K2 pro tips and stuff like that in short videos. Go ahead, Nick, you had a question or a comment?
I had a real quick comment to tell everybody. I got to head out. Johan, thank you for having me. For everybody attending today, we really do appreciate you carving out time for us. Johan's got a few more slides to go over, and we appreciate you making time for us today. But I need to head out, Johan.
Cool. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. I know it's the end of the hour, but we still have, we're going to the half-hour mark. So Nick, thanks for joining. We'll keep driving here. And then if you guys have any questions, you can follow up with us or reach out to any of us. I'll put our contact info at the end here, and you can reach out to any of us, and we can, dive deeper into any of these individual topics if you want. Okay. So traditional metal flashing. Thanks, Nick. Traditional metal flashings. So you could see the issue there. And again, they're not going away. There's pros and cons to these products. And if you want to install these systems, by all means, we have our flashing products. We always will have metal flashing products. But we can see the benefit of both if you're installing in hotter climates, or if you don't want to pry up the shingles and disturb them. And there are some shingles. I just had a meeting with our European team. There are some shingles in other parts of the world, and I've seen them here in the US, where they're kind of diamond shaped and they're interlocked, and you can't pry up the shingle coursing, and they're just glued down and they're interlocked, and you can't, I think they're called interlocking shingles. I could be wrong on that, but I'll touch on that more in our comp shingle training that we do. But those won't even allow you to get a metal flashing underneath there. So that's where the self-sealing products come in handy. So you can see where there's a problem where prying up shingles, removing nails, there could be some pros and cons to that. The number one problem to that is damaging the shingles, ripping the shingles. So there's one I ripped up on, kind of on purpose. I got a little aggressive just to see what it would take to rip them. And then you got to seal it up. Sometimes you don't have black sealant and it looks bad, and it gets all over the flashing, gets all over your gloves, gets all over your pants, gets all over your tools, your work truck. So nobody likes dealing with sealant. And if we can eliminate it, that's best. And this is our splice foot being installed. This is one of the first early systems we did earlier this year when it was a pre-launch, and we did a couple pilots with installers, and before we fully released it. And we'll do that a lot. We'll do the product's ready to go, but we'll do some pilots with close customers to see what their feedback is in case you want to make any changes before we release it to the public. This is a good example. So you can see there's only 2 holes there and 2 lag screws going in there. Now we have 6 holes in it, because you can install to the 4 corners for the decking, and 2 in the center for the rafter. And it uses the same screw. And I'll get to that in a minute. And then you also see sealant going around the edges. And we actually just got that approved that it doesn't need that sealant going around the edges, because the butyl does squeeze out. And as I mentioned before, the metal can depress into the shingle. The butyl actually squeezes out enough to protect those edges and not need any additional sealant on the edges. So that's a huge plus. And that is some changes we made once we released this, which we just did for the Splice Foot X and XL. So as I mentioned, we use the Roof Tech butyl and the screws, and they have all kinds of comprehensive testing. And we're also doing our own tests, and we're even testing other materials as well to see what works best. And, obviously supply and demand is really tough in this era of COVID that we're working in. So we're always looking at new solutions, but right now this specialized butyl is working out very well. And you can install this on almost any surface that is compatible with comp. Rolled comp flat roofs do work as well, some metal roofs as well, and some TPO roofs actually. So it's mostly used for pitched roofs, comp shingle. You do want to pay attention to the temperature of the butyl because it's tacky, and the temperature of the roof, not the ambient temperature outside. This is the temperature of the actual roof type. So I think there's a little typo there of the ambient temperature, but the surface of the roofing itself. So you want to be in that 22-degree range, and you can just get a little heat gun and measure the temperature of the building, and actually measure the temperature of the butyl and make sure it's using that function. So the reason being is because that butyl actually seals those screws as they go through through that butyl, it seals itself in the threads and you don't need additional sealant. So we have the splice foot X and the XL. So I'm going to skip ahead here to show you the application of it. So there's the X and the XL. The only difference is basically the height off the roof. So this is the XL. I'll have both here. So here to show you a side profile is the XL in my left hand and the X in my right hand. And basically the difference is we added this little shelf here. And what that does is two things. One, it gets the height up off the roof, the rail surface off the roof a little more, and is a little higher profile, which actually is still pretty low profile and looks real clean. And it also creates a little nice shelf. So when you install these, you want this shelf to the ridge of the roof. And then what that allows you to do is you just place your rail right on top of there and it lines you up perfectly with the T-bolt. So if you're an installer or if you're, working with your crews, you'll know that when you put these big 14-foot section rails, you lay them down, you're usually putting them on the roof. And then when you go to attach it to the roof attachment, you got to put your T-bolt in and secure it. And you sometimes have to have the guy, a partner on the roof, holding it up to get it to where you want. The shelf actually acts as that partner. So you could do it solo. You place these right onto this shelf and it stages it perfectly to your T-bolt can go in there and you're set to go. So that's just a nice little tip for that system. So the way these work is they call it the splice foot because you can use it as a splice. So notice it has two slotted holes in the foot. So you don't have to use it as a rail connector or splice. If you have one rail going all the way across, then you only use one T-bolt. So one rail, one T-bolt, and it is kitted with screws to go into the roof, into the rafter. So 2 screws and one T-bolt set per mount. And I believe they're boxes of 20 mounts. So you got 20 T-bolt sets and 40 wood screws to go into the rafter. If you're going to go into the decking, then you want 4 for the corner. So you want to order additional screws, which you have a part number for that. So again, this picture you're seeing here is the early model where it didn't have those corner screws, but you can see now we have the 6 screws for options. So you're going into the center for the rafter. And if you're going to the decking, you're going into the 4 corners. And I'll touch on the deck versus rafter in a minute here. But the most important thing to know is whenever I get on a job with a new crew doing this for the first time, they see those 2 slots and they automatically want to put 2 T-bolts in there, which, that makes sense, but it's only because it's an optional splice foot. So if it's one rail going across, it only needs 1 T-bolt. You never put in the 2 T-bolts unless you're connecting 2 rails at that intersection, and you don't have to do that. So the beauty of that, let me skip ahead real quick. Well, I'll go through the installation process and then I'll show you how this works. So this image is just showing you the height between the X and the XL, and that's in our tech sheet. You can see that from the website. We have all the documents on the product page. But I just wanted to show you a little animation of what I'm talking about the application for the difference between one rail and the splice function. So you'll see it go in here with one rail first with 1 T-bolt. So you peel off the protective paper, put it down. In this case, it's going to the rafter with 2 wood screws, and then the T-bolt, 1 T-bolt for 1 rail in this scenario. And then you'll see the 2 rails come in as a splice foot. So pretty slick feature. I really like this application. Again, it's optional to do it as a splice foot like that. You don't have to do that. That is just, hopefully that played for you guys. I'm going to do it one more time, so let it run through. So again, peeling the paper, you stick it down, it goes into the rafter in this case. And then you have 1 rail with 1 T-bolt. And then there's the splice function. I'll let that play out for a second. So that's an animation from our video. We have a whole installation video that's about to be produced. There's one overview video already on the website. You could see that. and we have an installation video, and I'll just run through it here. So naturally, you're going to always corner out your array, right? You do your design, your layout, setbacks, all that fun stuff. And then usually guys just pick the course line they're going into to get the frame, the clamps going, the rails going where they need to, so they clamp on the right section of the module frame. You can see that a little bit better here, right? You have clamping zones on the module frame. So that's going to determine where your rail goes. So most guys will pick a course line that falls within that range, so you get your clamp zone. But I like to snap chalk lines. So if you snap a chalk line, it's going to give you a nice straight reference point to put in your mount. So you can use that shelf or this little ridge here that's at the back of the mount to line it up, or just line it up with that kind of L-foot section, whichever you want to do. But it gives you a nice reference point to line it up straight, and that's going to make sure your rail is nice and straight. Some guys go off the shingle line, and that's okay if you think the shingle is going to be straight, your rail is going to follow that. So sometimes snapping a chalk line to make sure it's straight and your rail is not kind of wavy on the roof, then it just makes it nice and clean and looks good. So in this case, it's just going through the animation I showed you. You peel the paper, you put it down. Again, this is an older model, so this has only had the rafter option, but you can go to the deck, and I will show that. You add sealant to the edges if you want to. You don't have to. It is now a new step that's optional. And then again, there's the single T-bolt set for one rail, which is included, and then 2 T-bolt sets if you're going to be splicing it. And again, if you are splicing it, a lot of guys, every time I go to a job site, they're doing this and I explain the splice function of the mount, they typically say, well, it's not going to line up that way. But, on the job, I always say, well, that's fine. You don't have to use it that way. As long as you got rail connectors on the truck, you're good to go. So here's a good example where they had staggered mounts and they were laying out their rails. And sure enough, there's a couple mounts that lined up pretty close and almost perfect in some cases to the rail intersection. So if that happens, by all means, you omit that rail connector and connect it to the splice foot itself. So if you got a lot of guys install the rails and they have little rail ends and they cut them off. If you've got enough play and it's, within a foot or so, and you want to move it over and grab that foot and do the splice foot function, then you can do that. But again, if it's outside of that, you want to use a rail connector, you can. So I highly recommend keeping rail connectors just in case on the truck, just so you have that function. But you can always throw in a mount if you need to. And the nice thing is, the reason why we have this longer kind of flange on the side is because you can slip this under the rail if you had to, and you can still have access. Even if the rail's here, it's not blocking it out. You could still have access to those screws if you want to throw in a mount. Kind of, sometimes guys will put in mounts and their spacing is wrong and they forgot one mount maybe on the edge where there's an edge module and they need to, put in a supporting foot. You can actually throw one in underneath the rail and still get access to those screws. And then, determine if you're going rafter or deck attached. So we've done our testing. The same screw, to put this in perspective, here's our screw for here's our biggest one for our tile hook. Here's a big 5/16 screw that is standard with any mounting system. And here's our screw for the splice foot. They're a much smaller diameter. They're much smaller on the head, and you're putting 2 into the rafter. A 5/16 going into a rafter is a pretty big bolt going into the rafter. If it's a single penetration for a mount, I understand a 5/16 is pretty standard, right? With any kind of flashing mount you're doing, that makes sense. But if you're going 2 bolts into the rafter, this is surprisingly very strong. And the other thing is it's small. So it has this little self-tapping edge in it. If you look real close, I don't know if you could see that. There's a little cut edge in it, and that allows you to self-tap. So you don't have to do pilot holes, and you don't have to do pilot holes or sealant into the pilot hole. So obviously if you miss the rafter, then seal that up. But this 4-inch base is going to create a big surface area to cover that missed pilot hole. But then when you go into it fresh, this is actually a bolt I pulled out, and you can see how it's coated with the butyl. So when it goes in, you saw that picture earlier. If you look closely, it goes in and the butyl coats the threads and it self-seals, and you don't need pilot holes because these are small and they self-tap into the wood. So it's a really nice product. I'm really happy with the performance. And if it's done right, you don't have to do any pilot holes and you don't need to rely on sealant. So that's a huge thing for your installers, or if you are the installer, because you're not using tubes of sealant. There's no mess, there's no garbage. You're not getting it all over yourself. I would use sealant as a secondary option to seal missed pilot holes, or, sometimes you bust the shingle or something. You don't need that as your primary seal protected. So in this case, on the left side, you got your rafter, which is 2 screws included in the kit. And then if you're doing deck attach, you're going to want to order some additional screws, which we have a part number for that. I should put it on the screen. I apologize, it's not there. I will add that to the next one, but you can find that on our product page. We just added an additional box of screws, also additional box of T-bolts if you're doing some more splicing with the splice foot. But what I will say about deck attach, I know a lot of installers will see this and they'll say, yes, deck attach. I don't have to look for rafters. It's so much faster. You got to make sure you do your engineering. So if you go back into base, you can select deck attach, and you go in there and you select deck attach, and it will do the engineering. Our engineering is based off worst case scenario. So it's deck attached. Our testing was into 7/16 OSB. It's the weakest there is. So just keep that in mind. You want to make sure if you're going into thicker plywood, you're good to go. I mean, it's pretty strong, but you want to look at the engineering. You want to compare where you're at, see the limitations. I would use our engineering and use the base tool, so that's going to give you your spacing. So if you're doing 6-foot spans for rafter connection, the 2 screws are going to match that. We can do 6-foot spans with that. But if you're getting into deck attach for your roof attachments, for your primary roof attachments, you're going to start seeing those spans go down to 4-foot, in some cases 2-foot sections. So it depends on your area and what you're allowed to do. So I always say go to the rafter if you can, but if you got some, sometimes you get out to the edge of the system, or you get into rafter changes, and all of a sudden the rafters are going, horizontal on you now. They're going east and west, right? Like you see in that little image there. I just pulled this straight from Google. Sometimes you see that. You see rafters transition and they're going the other way, and now you lost your structural attachment for your rail. So that's where deck attachment becomes a huge advantage. And we have done the testing, and you are allowed to do this, but just remember that you want to do your research. The other thing to consider is the plywood. So I didn't show this, but if you look at that bottom picture there, sorry, I jumped around, but if you look at how plywood is attached, you're going to have seams. These are plywood's usually 8, I think they're 8-foot by 4-foot standard plywood sections. So somewhere in there, you're going to have some seams. And you want to make sure you're not hitting that seam, and if it's not spinning on you. So that's why I say use rafter connections as a primary attachment and secondary for deck attach if you have to. So it does help in these tricky situations. Getting into tile real quick. I know we're running out of time. It's amazing. You guys give me more time, I'm just going to talk more. So I apologize. I know I saw some questions in there. There's only 2 so far. So I don't think we have a lot of questions, but getting into tile, I do a whole section on tile. So I'm just going to blast through this real quick so I can get to the Q&A. Concrete tiles, these interlocking tiles, we have some great products. I do a whole section on roofing best practices, on tile construction. There's things to look for, like cracked tiles, and you're doing that whole investigation process of site visits. There's a whole new set of rules when you're looking for things to avoid damaged tiles, roof leaks, things like that. But the way tile installations are done commonly, you get this, you're grinding the bottom of the tile if you're doing tile hooks, or you use a replacement flashing. So we have we have a bunch of different tile hook options. So we have our standard 3S hook that came from Germany. It's probably our strongest. It's got adjustable heights in the foot itself, and it has a return and uses an L foot. So there's so much adjustability there. We actually try to discontinue this product because it's a higher price because there's just more metal, but we have a couple customers that just love this product and they do not want us to go away from it. So it's not going away. 3S will stay as our tried and true. We have a beefy flat tile hook that we brought over from Germany, and it is very stout. It's a little bit short and stockier. In Southern California, we got a lot of guys using more, steel hooks. So we did just introduce a more cost competitive option for steel hooks. So we have a one-piece welded hook. So we try to name the products based on what they do. So we have 2 universal hooks. One is a 9-inch base. It's all one piece, as you see there. It does come with the lag screws as well as the T-bolts. We have the standard hook +2, meaning it's 2 parts because it's adjustable. And then it's a 5.5-inch base. So it's a lot of adjustability. It's probably one of our more popular ones in Southern California. And then we introduced a new tile hook that's a little thinner and longer, so you can have more reach, and it is the Flat Tile Hook X. So we have all these tile hooks available now, and we did just introduce our Everflash TRFs, and that is our new replacement tile series for concrete tile roofs. These are, I'm really happy with how these turned out. They look great, they install great, and they have all kinds of cool product features. One in particular, when you get these interlocking replacement flashings, a lot of times on a wavy roof, you get these like popping up in the corners. So we added these tabs that are proprietary to our product, and you secure them on the tile on the top, or sorry, on the underlap of the tile. You lock them in so it doesn't move on you, and it's malleable, so you can form them to the tile roof. And then on the W and the S tile shape, we pre-installed these tabs so you can just push them back and you don't have to cut anything. The only one you have to cut is on flat tile, because on this face, your hook can pop out anywhere. But on S tile and W tile, they're always going to pop out in the valley. So we pre-installed some tabs there so you can push them back and just install it. No need to pull out the tin snips. The only one you have to do that for is on the flat tile hook, where you can just cut 2 lines and push it back wherever the face is. And this product also doesn't have the interlocks on the sides. So it's a cap over the full tile, blank tile, and it meets on both sides. So they're a little wider so that you can just slip it in, lock it in, and you're done. It does also have a nail hole at the top if you wanted to nail it in and secure it. But with the hooks on the sides, over the tile hook, and the tiles pressuring on top, you probably don't need that nail on the top. So really nice product, really well engineered and designed. I worked really hard with our engineering team, and they did a fantastic job executing this. And we just released this. So if you're interested in this product, definitely get a sample or just go for it, install it. You won't have any problems if you've already installed products like this. Just go ahead and buy them and try them. We did add some water shedding features into this too. So there's a lot that went into this design, but I don't want to bore you with that. One thing that's really cool is the butyl research that we're doing with our splice foot. We're looking at adding that to our hooks, because we know some guys are working in like cities in Bakersfield, California, for example, is one that's strict on having 3-coursing or underlayment flashing. So we're starting to see these butyls perform so well that they're working on tile roofs as well. So that's coming, and that's going to be a lot cleaner design and install for tile roofs. So I know we only have a few minutes here for Q&A, and I apologize for that. But there's only 3 questions in here, so I'm not too worried about it. Let me pull those up real quick. If you do have questions, again, here's my email, and there's my phone number. I'll pull Nick's back up too, just so you have it, but feel free to ask questions. And I have some here. I'm going to pull them up. Let me pull this onto my other screen. It's not blocking. Yeah, so some are just comments from our own team. Oh, I guess we don't have any questions. So either guys were multitasking, or we did such a good job that we answered all your questions. And again, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll pull up Nick's information here too.
Johan, we do have a question on
Oh, good.
YouTube.
Okay, go for it.
Can you use splice feet with shared rail installs?
That's a great question. So the splice foot that you see here, it's a fixed L foot. So that's a great question. And I would say the short answer is no. I mean, you probably could if you were really good at math and you really wanted to nail it. But, sometimes your drill moves and you're not going to have the rail meet where it is. So the reason we have on comp shingle, we have this slider kit is so that you can move this L foot where you need to be so that you can meet that rail. So that's a very good question. And I would avoid it just because the reason why I called to do chalk lines and snap those lines is because you want your rail straight as can be so it's not bending, right? If there's a little bit of wave in it, it's not a big deal. But on a shared rail, that would be a nightmare because when you lay down your module, and I'll go back to the slide of shared rail, when you lay down your module to catch that module for one rail, then it's going to, if you're off just a little bit, it's going to not line up properly and you're going to be, cursing like a sailor. So, so I have been there and it's not fun if it's off. So I would say I'd avoid it. What does work, interestingly enough, and I've been promoting this, is RoofTech's RT Mini is the same butyl that we use. It's not our product, but I like their product and we're partners with them. So the RoofTech RT Mini does allow you to slide the L foot. So as long as you're going to the rafter with their product, which you can to the rafter, you can get that slide effect. So to answer your question, I wouldn't do it with the splice foot, but I would do it with the RoofTech RT Mini. So if you wanted that same butyl seal with the sliding feature, then the RoofTech product is going to be the solution for you. I hope that answers that question. And feel free to reach out. I'm just going back on slides here to kind of reiterate what I was saying.
I just wanted to address one question.
Sure.
We got, where can we get a sample kit? If you guys are curious about this product, you can always send an email to our marketing email or to Johan, and we can get a sample kit sent out to you. Obviously, we'll just need your name and address and quantity of sample kits you'd like, but we're happy to do that for you.
Yeah. Do we still have the marketing at k2-systems.com? Is that still our
marketing-us at k2-systems.com?
Got it. That makes sense because we have Germany and Brazil and Italy and UK.
Yes. I'll put the email in the chat so you can all access it.
Yeah. If you want a sample kit, the sample kit comes with a rail section like this. It comes with the rail section like this with the rail connector already, I think just like this. And it has the mid clamp, end clamp, the Yeti clamp. I think it even has the add-on, I believe. It has, correct me if I'm wrong, Dakota, the standard flashing maybe, but it does include our splice foot, I believe.
Yes, it has both options.
Awesome. And then it also has all the small little components that are universal, like the ground lug, everything I have here, ground lug, Yeti clamp. I believe it also has some of the wire management clips in there. So
yes, all three options.
Yeah, so definitely order a sample through our marketing team or any of our sales reps. Just email us. But again, it's in the chat Dakota put in there. So follow up with us and sign up for our email list. You're probably already on it if you found this training. We're going to be adding a lot of more video content. Dakota and I just built out, or Nick and I just built out the roofs down at the new facility in Oceanside. And Dakota and I did a series of filming, and there's all kinds of roofing information we're going to be putting out there. So I'm very excited about the training expansion. So coming into the new year, we'll have all kinds of new info. And if you want specific content, reach out to me directly because I'm building all the training right now. And I really do appreciate the feedback from anybody if there's some training you want. And we do custom training too, based on your crews. So if you want some of that, by all means, reach out and we can schedule something with you. So I guess that's the end. I don't see any more questions. If we do have any more, again, you can reach out to any of us. There's my email. Nick's email is on the screen there. And our marketing email is valid too. Just reach out. We try to do our best on customer support. I know some guys have headaches staying on hold for a long time at other companies, but it's a big thing for us is we're trying to make sure we answer all your questions. Just make sure you're calling the right number. You can use the Sherpa on our website. That's a little kind of chat feature. And then also our emails, the marketing-us is good. And then I'm going to flip real quick one last time to the last slide. So you have my email, which is just always our first name dot last name. And then it's k2-systems.com. So I tried to click on it, but it didn't let me go. So I have to scroll through. Oh, almost got it. There it is. So I'll leave you guys with that. You can screenshot it or just write it down. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So that's it. Thank you guys for joining us. I know we went a few minutes over. I appreciate you guys staying on. Have a good day and stay safe out there.